To start, I wonder if you wouldn't mind talking about, I mean, the inception, like the first time the concept of the character started to like float in your head.
You know what? It wasn't like that. You'd think by this time I would have a more interesting story, but it's just something that kind of came out. It was a real quick, haphazardy, you know, I borrowed a suit from the director of the Groundlings. Right before I did it, another Groundling handed me a little kid bow tie. It wasn't red at that time, it was black. And the name came from, I had a little harmonica that said Pee-wee on it, and I knew a kid whose last name was Herman when I was little. And Pee-wee Herman sounded like like, why would you make that name up? Like that, you'd make up a better name than that? Right. Herman, like a last name that's a first name, I kind of like that. And Pee-wee, like a nickname. I don't know, the whole thing, the voice was from a play that I had done, and I just did it. I think my what would it be? I think what was fortuitous, I'm not sure what's the right word here, but where I think I went right was in identifying, oh, stick with this, like people react to this, right. You know? The reaction was just so different than any other character I had ever done that it was kind of hard to ignore that. It was all part of an extended improvisation about being in a comedy club, and I decided to go for the comedian who you could tell would never really succeed as a comedian, because I was kind of that person in real life. Like I can't remember punchlines to jokes, and my timing is odd, so you just go with what you get or what you have, you know.
Yeah, so it's been a long time since you put on the suit. So when you started to prepare for the show in 2011 and to think about this film, I mean, what was it like getting into this familiar space?
You know, it was sort of like developing it in the first place. I've had less time to come up with an intriguing story, and I don't have one. But I mean, there's not much to it really. It's less glamorous and romantic than it really was, or really than it could be, than it seems like it would be. I guess we didn't really think about it in those terms. You know, we just mainly were trying to figure out how do we do it and not copy anything or not have it be too much like something else.
Can you please talk about your creative team and just kind of, starting this with Judd and Paul?
Oh my God, I mean, just fantasy kind of situation, you know? Like, when you're struggling to get a movie made and Judd Apatow goes, I'd like to make the movie, that makes it 1 billion times simpler. I'm sure Netflix, likes Pee-wee Herman, but they love Judd Apatow. Right. So, I'm kind of riding his coattails a little bit coming into Netflix. And, he's a fantastic person in terms of a producer, writer. He knew when to tell us, what about this? Think about this, both in the creative writing process, and then when we were actually in production, he would come around once in a while and try improvising a couple things here, which is something I don't normally do. We work very, very differently. His movies are, I don't know what percentage, but a nice chunk of his movies are improv, and we don't improv much. We do everything ahead of time. Paul Rust and I improvise, but we put everything on the page, and most everything in the movie was written ahead of time. And Judd Apatow came up with Paul Rust for me. He introduced me to Paul Rust, who I, at first, without meeting Paul Rust, just from Judd going, I know, I'm gonna get the exact right guy, I was thinking, you're never gonna get the right guy. And then he was. He was right. He was right about almost everything.
My first memory of Pee-wee Herman is there was HBO used to do these free weekends for people who didn't have HBO as a way to convince them to get it. Yeah. So they showed Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and we taped it off of TV, and that's the version I grew up with. And for whatever reason, because of the free weekend subscription, whatever, they had phone numbers running at the bottom of the screen. So the version of Pee-wee that I grew up with had phone numbers at the bottom of the screen, which is probably not the best way to.
Yeah.
I doubt Tim Burton would want that to be the preferred director's cut.
If you think you can remember, what do you think you responded to in retrospect?
I think the thing that I most responded to was just the sort of sweetness and sincerity of the character. You know, a lot of sort of comedy characters are about people who come in and like wreck stuff and disrupt the status quo.
Right.
The thing that I liked about Pee-wee was the status quo already liked him, which was a treat.
So what was your reaction when you found out that you were being considered for this incredible job?
Yeah, I remember when I got the call about the job, I was watching a Real Housewives reunion show,
Okay.
and my phone rang, and I picked up, and it was Judd Apatow,
Right.
and he was like, "Hey, I just been talking with Paul Reubens.
Mhm.
We're thinking about doing a Pee-wee movie. Would you want to co-write it?" And my soul left my body for the next 2 weeks, and then we were off and running. The writer's room was Paul's house.
Okay.
I would drive up to his house, and we would hang out, and he's such a sweet guy. He would cook a dinner for us, and we would eat dinner and then like talk for 3 hours and then eventually get around to writing.
Right.
Most of the time was spent goofing off.
Gotcha.
But that's a big part of the process.
I love the first scene so much. Can
Yeah.
you kind of talk about brainstorming for how you were going to kick off this film?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely knew we wanted to start the movie off with a dream because
Mhm.
that's how the other two Pee-wee's movies started. We
Right.
wanted to keep that tradition alive,
Yeah.
along with the word "big" in the title. That was the other thing we wanted to keep alive. But the opening scene sort of references a very classic movie, and Paul and I, this happens a lot. Paul and I are both big fans of the movie that it references, so we were like very happy that we got to reference one of our favorite films.
Mac and me. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
I remember distinctly sitting on the couch watching it with my dad, and we were both laughing, and even at the very young age, I had a sense that we were laughing at different things
Yeah.
at the same time, which is close. And now that I watch it as an adult, I'm like, oh yeah, we were laughing at very different things.
My oldest memory, I mean, was more with Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I grew up in the desert in California, so I drove by those dinosaurs all the time. And I remember being like that one shot where they're sitting inside the mouth, the shadow of the teeth. And I was just like, that was the coolest thing ever. I like to think he was still up there with her.
What do you guys think you responded to back then, if you could guess? I mean, you probably would have to guess.
I don't know, he's just pure of heart, you know, and he's funny and cute as a button.
Mhm.
I had a crush on him. Everything else seems so dull compared to him.
Yeah,
Totally.
He's
And-
having breakfast and like his head's gonna spin. You know?
totally. He always makes those elaborate breakfasts, and then eats like one bite.
Yeah.
That's
That's
I
how he
don't
fits
know.
in the suit.
And just how amused he is by everything.
Yeah.
The character is just loves life.
So not only did you guys get to get transported into Pee-wee's universe, but you're also into like the Russ Myers universe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
was that fun for you guys?
I enjoyed kind of creating this like over-sexualized character though, like just in those outfits and the heels, like you can't just walk on set and like just be kind of like looking at the craft table like hunched over. It's like everything was kind of like a,
Yeah.
you know, a thing. And it's very different from how I am normally, so that was fun.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the heels because I was when we started creating the character and trying different costumes, the heels were really high, like heels today, and something about it just wasn't feeling right. And we ended up, at least I ended up in like pretty modest heel, like it was sort of a
Yeah, 'cause
cowboy
we had to
boot.
run in them.
Yeah, we did have to run in them. But there's something that it's a different kind of sexy in a lower heel. It's a heel, but not a hooch heel. It was interesting.